Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, the tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast. Today, we have Matt Hartell with Old Town Outfitters joining us. Old Town Outfitters is in Guatemala in Antigua. So, Matt, the first question I'm going to ask you, is it Antigua or Antigua?
It's Antigua.
I've heard a few different variations. I've been there myself, and even though I've been there, I've heard a few different pronunciations. So thanks for clearing that one for us.
Yeah,
So
certainly not to be confused with Antigua in the West Indies. I've had people end up there that were supposed to be coming here.
You know, I've heard stories keep showing up at the wrong hotel because the hotel name or the lodge name is slightly similar, but it is when they end up in a whole different country. That's pretty cool, pretty interesting. Probably not so cool at the moment if you're the one that did it, but anyway, I just want to jump in, and because you're like most tour operators, we have a story that's kind of interesting. Maybe you've had people ask you before, how did you get into this? Where are you from? How did you get into this? And what was that like along the way? So just feel free to jump in and share with us.
Yeah, sure. So, originally from North Carolina, and had come down here in mid-90s as part of my university Christmas break. And my brother was studying Spanish here, and we traveled around. He had my bike with him, and I flew in, and we were in Belize, and then I came over to Guatemala, and at that point, we're traveling around, and I just really, it's kind of my first time out of the country. I was, again, in university, so still pretty young. Was, really caught by the travel bug at that point, and really realized that traveling around, and certainly, I don't know if it was Guatemala specifically, but it was right place, right time. It was just a super cool place to be at that age, and traveled around and tried to not go back to school. And my parents were like, no, that's not happening. They gave me the big finger wag. And I was, reluctantly and begrudgingly, I think I just as a point made sure I was late getting back to school by a week or so. But tried to drag my feet as much as possible and stay. And then once that was not in the cards, I was back in the U.S. At that point, my brother and I started to kind of plot and plan on getting back here. And we kind of used the next couple of years.
Matt, I have to ask. I can't let this one go by without asking. Were your parents right?
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know if they're listening to this, but I sense that it's hard to admit that.
It's a tough one because, I feel like I would have made it work, but I probably wouldn't be in the same spot. I don't really know what would have happened. It probably would have gone south quick. I didn't have, bubble gum in my pocket. I don't know how I would have made that. So I went back, they probably were right. And again, more than anything else, it kind of gave me a little bit of time, and my brother and I had time to kind of formalize the game plan and put, I would loosely call it a business plan. Who knew what those things were back at that point. But, we decided we wanted to come back, and we spent the next couple of years scrounging up bicycles and gear and camping gear, and, bought a computer that had 10 gigabytes of hard drive space, which I thought was just going to be world changing. And, and saved up and saved what money we had, and bought a car. And by the end of 98, so I graduated in May of 98. By November, we were in a car loaded with, all our worldly possessions and belongings, driving across the U.S. and through Mexico, and made it to Guatemala.
What did your parents think at that point? Were they like, okay, fine, you came back, finished school, so now we're on board, or was it still some resistance?
No, there was still resistance because there was a good year and a half of this planning process that was going under the radar to my parents. And I want to say it was Easter of '98 when we were in. My brother was in DC, and we were in DC, and we were sitting there. And we're like, okay, we got to spill the beans because we had already had this planned out. We had been stockpiling here like it was happening. And at that point, over like Easter brunch or something like that, dropped the bomb. And I want to say my dad just got up from the table, walked away. My mom burst into tears, and that was it. And it was like they knew that our minds were made up and we were going, and that was it. And so,
Did you ever
and I
did you ever
was
imagine? I'm curious if you ever imagined them like before you dropped the bomb. I'm like, oh, aren't you happy that that the boys let that Guatemala thing go and like are interested in something else now, and they're probably like totally relieved that you just thinking you guys had forgotten about it. So yeah,
for
that's
sure, and I'm sure that like there was the odd like whoops, probably let something slip here and there. My parents were like, "What was that?" But that all happened, and we were planning. And at that point, my parents they had been to Guatemala, and really the only part of Guatemala they had been to was Petén, up around Tikal and the northern jungles, and it looks very different than does Antigua. But I think that and when we were there in the mid '90s, the country was still in civil war. They signed the peace accords in '96, so we were there in '95 and part of '96, but. And so it's a very much different country, and where we were going to was a very different spot. Antigua is like Wonderland. It's beautiful. It's Spanish colonial, and I don't think my parents could grasp that. This is largely kind of pre-internet. I mean, you're going to pull out the old encyclopedia and figure out where we're going. So, they were heartbroken. We were doing it. It didn't matter. We were going, and we left, and we did it. And then I think that my parents, that was November. My parents came for probably Easter. And when they came and touched down in Guatemala City, and we got them to Antigua, all of a sudden my mom was like, this place isn't so bad. This place is pretty cool. And again, Antigua is just a very different part of the country than, where they had been. I think they were expecting that we were living, on earthen floors and cooking up an open fire in the house. And then it probably wasn't too far from that. We at least had four walls and roof, and we were kind of giving it a go. But Antigua was just this magical, beautiful Spanish colonial town that's phenomenal. Cobblestone streets and super picturesque, and I don't think they really saw that coming. Didn't really know. So quickly, I would say quickly, the dialogue changed. Okay, you guys aren't just down here in the cantinas, you're actually trying to put an effort and go at this, and so they were pretty excited at that point.
well, it's interesting. We grow up, whether we travel or not, we grow up with ideas and stories about these places, and sometimes there's hesitation. I've been in tourism for quite a while, but years ago, I sold all my stuff and bought a one-way ticket to Colombia. And I'd never been. And I'm about 50. So I grew up during those times when everything on the news was not good about, lots of Latin America, Guatemala included. And, my parents were pretty adventurous. My father was very adventurous. He was a hot air balloon pilot, and we had traveled all 50 states. And I remember when I told him as a 48-year-old man that I'm bought a one-way ticket to Colombia, there was some concern. So I get that. He actually had copied and pasted the entire State Department warning off the State Department website and copied and pasted that into a text and sent it to me 3 days before I got on the plane. So,
I know. Right when we were loading the car to come here, so fall of '98, Hurricane Mitch had just ravished most of Latin America, made landfall through Guatemala, Salvador, parts of Guatemala were in the mud. The Petén was on fire. There had been something that happened with a Greek traveler from like St. Mary's College. It was something that happened. They were like, there was all this press that was, in the news for Guatemala in specific. My parents were looking at us like, what is wrong with you guys? I mean, of all the places you could go right now, looks like the world is ending down there. You're packing up everything you got to go like run towards it. Like, I don't understand what you guys are doing. And so we definitely battled with that.
Wow, I can imagine. So tell me, what was it like? Because really, your operation was, I don't know if it was the first in Antigua, but probably the first that really took off the way it has. So tell us what that was like actually starting the business and what did you learn along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were certainly in, the first one or two. There was another company that was doing a little bit of stuff when we had got here, but they were quickly out of business. They weren't really doing much. So we were kind of the first. I mean, it's kind of wild to think. I look around now and Antigua has changed quite a bit since 98 to now. There's an operator, a hostel, and there's a North Face store in town. It's crazy. It's like there's an operator doing everything. And we're still here. And look at kind of I look back on it and like the contacts we've made, the trips we've forged, and stuff that we had done, way back when this country was certainly, really rural, rustic, and rough around the edges and hard to get to. It was a lot of fun. It was it was. This is largely pre-internet, so I don't even think we had a website when we came. It was all Lonely Planet driven, and putting flyers on every phone pole and wall in the bars and sensitive dives and all that sort of thing. And it was slow going, and it was very much like May would roll around and the rains would come in, and I'd be asleep on the sofa. There'd be nothing, inside the store because there was just nobody here. And over time, Guatemala and the face of tourism has changed here, and Antigua now is kind of a destination spot in itself. So you get people just coming to Antigua. Before people were coming and they were not going to come to Antigua unless they'd done Mexico and El Salvador. So we get a lot of destination travel now, which means that tourism is kind of picked up and is an actual real industry here now. And so it's been fun to kind of be on the front lines of that. And like you said, we were certainly the first ones here that are really taking people out there. I mean, in the early days, you could drink beer in the bars and dance salsa and study Spanish. That's about all you could do. And so we were largely kind of like right place, right time with the right amount of stuff. No one was taking people on non-bike rides or taking people on hikes or venturing into the backcountry. Again, it was just a couple of years post-Civil War, so it was all international travel at that point, doing anything like that. Just the wounds of the Civil War were too fresh for a lot of folks here.
Yeah. Like, that brings up, I guess, the question is like, how would you describe the difference between the type of person? Because I have a story in my head. I lived in Belize. I've been to Guatemala several times, Antigua, but I don't have the kind of you have the ability to kind of look at where it was when you got there and where it is now. So, what have you seen in the type of traveler that you're dealing with now, as opposed to what it was when you first got started?
Sure. I mean, when we first got here, it was 100% backpackers. People, overlanders coming through. Again, people would maybe start their 6-month walkabout. Largely, people weren't just coming to Guatemala. They were Central America. They were kind of going from here to Nicaragua, maybe Mexico and Guatemala. Folks on shoestring. There was many services. Getting it was a little harder. It was a little more of an intrepid kind of traveler. We weren't doing very much booked online from folks coming down before. Again, when we started, it was very little internet. It was hard to get down here. So like pre-selling adventures was non-existent. It was largely word of mouth travel with backpackers. And over time, I mentioned, I think earlier, there was a North Face. We're selling Patagonia gear in Antigua. It's definitely developed. So now, it's gone from kind of being one stop on a larger multi-country tour that people were doing kind of early days, late 90s, to people coming like just to Antigua and nowhere else. They come just to hang out in Antigua and experience the culture and the architecture and the markets and that sort of thing, and maybe hike the volcano and get outside. So Antigua, the tourism here has definitely changed over time. So it's gone from hardcore backpacker to now folks flying in on private planes to Guatemala City and driving to Antigua to hang out and adventure and do stuff. And so you're definitely getting the kind of gamut of travelers at this point.
You think that the travelers in the beginning, obviously, what I'm hearing is more spontaneous, probably more flexible, just kind of, I don't want to say floating around out there, but just kind of like, hey, cool, let's go try this. Let's go try this. Would you describe them as more adventurous in any certain way, or is that a misconception?
I mean, I think that certainly traveling anywhere in this part of the world, or probably largely in many places around the world, was a lot more adventurous some years ago. It was harder to get info. It was a little bit more of like just kind of stepping off the plane and seeing what was going to happen. It's harder. I mean, now the internet being what it is, and kind of where we are. It's just, I think the face of tourism has totally changed. I mean, you can get all the intel you need to go most anywhere you want to go. Again, you're going to go into the backcountry in Guatemala, like going to the backcountry in Nepal. There's definitely still going to be a level of adventure in there for sure. I mean, you can't find everything out, but just the level of access to info is way more than it was back then. I'm not to say that people are different, but I think that it was probably a little rougher, a little rawer around the edges, 25 years ago than it is now. But that's not to say that you missed the boat. Guatemala's still a phenomenal place to go, and I can still take you way out in the country where you still get that feel.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. As I was listening to you say that, I was thinking, I'm curious, like, if you were to advise somebody and say, look, if you really want to have an adventure, you want to make it more adventurous, maybe don't plan so much. Maybe don't read every single website. Don't, go on all the forums and read every single person's comment. So for me in my travels, I've been traveling full time for 2 years now. And honestly, I do very little planning. Probably should do a little bit more than I do. But I actually enjoy the thrill of just hopping on a bus sometimes and like, I don't know where I'm going to go, but I have faith in my ability to figure it out. And so it's kind of like, I guess what I'm saying is it feels like maybe we have an opportunity now that if people really want to plan and have that certainty and that security of kind of knowing what to expect, they can. But at the same time, somebody can go to the same location and still make it quite adventurous if they just don't plan and they just show up.
I mean, I live in Antigua, and every day is an adventure. So, and that goes for someone who's living here. So to come off the plane is definitely going to be an adventure. So, like you say, you could definitely decide you're going to go to Guatemala, pack your bag, get here, and let it kind of unfold in front of you, and do it that way. And you'd have a phenomenal time. I remember traveling in the early or late 90s around here and being in Belize and Honduras, and just there was no info. Just kind of like asking people, like, "Hey, where have you guys been? Where's a good place to go? What I heard about a waterfall over here. You should go check it out." And you can still kind of get that here, and try anywhere. Yeah, it'd be interesting to take that approach. Like, I want to go to Guatemala. I'm not really read too much. I know a couple things, and then kind of let it unravel for you.
Well, it's kind of like, you packed up all your stuff. You had, because your parents had the foresight to encourage you to take your time and slow down a little bit. But ultimately, still, you got in a car with a bunch of bicycles, and it sounds like a computer, and you move there. That's super adventurous. And I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but you're right. I think that people can make things as adventurous as they want to make them. I spent the summer before last with my son. He was, I guess, 15 at the time. We flew into Belize City with no plan of how we were going to get to the next place. We just flew in, we found a place, we went there, and then it's like, okay, let's go to Guatemala. How do we get to Guatemala? You get on the bus, and then we get to where we were going, and we thought, okay, we'll stay here a few days. Then we went here and there, and we were on buses with chickens and sick kids, and way overloaded, right, with the doors hanging open as you're flying down the road. And it's like, that's not the typical tourist experience. But then there were other people that came there on a more organized tour. They're up in Flores, they're doing the Tikal, and they've got their transfers all lined up, and that's great. They're able to have their experience. We could have our experience in the same place and have two totally different experiences, which I think is really cool that we're able to do that.
Absolutely.
Where before, people that wanted that certainty just didn't leave the country.
That's
So
right. That's right.
so, um, so Antigua, you've mentioned a couple times. I think that it's kind of like it doesn't, in some regards, doesn't kind of fit in. I've spent enough time in Central America to know it's like, okay, this is a little different, but it's got quite a storied history. Um, what you already mentioned a couple things, but what is it you want people to know about Antigua that might be thinking about Guatemala, might be thinking about Latin America, or might just be thinking a place to pick up and, I don't know, move to? You've got a lot of nomads that kind of set up home there. That was, I spent a good month there myself. And so, what do you think people should know about Antigua?
Well, I mean, I think that Antigua really positions itself pretty well. I mean, we're 45 kilometers from Guatemala City, which is the main, airport access point to this country unless you come by land. And it's a world away. It's big bustle of a humongous Central American capital city. And then 45 kilometers away, 10 by 10 square grid cobblestone throwback to the 1500s. I mean, it's a great kind of launching off spot. It's I'm not saying that Guatemala City is not worth seeing, but I think that getting to Antigua and it becomes a really great base of operations. There's tons to explore. It's a good place to hang for a couple of days, do some excursions, and then you get out to the volcanoes, or you go to Lake Acatenango, or a bit more further west. You can kind of figure out where folks have been, and there's a lot of stuff you can do kind of from here and kind of go out and it becomes a good home for folks. I live in Antigua, but but the rest of Guatemala is very different, and the rest of Guatemala is very phenomenal and worth venturing into. I think Antigua is a great place to kind of come to, and then get out and go and experience some of the other parts of the country. I think that if you only came to Antigua and you said, I went to Guatemala, you saw a part of it, but you didn't really see it. It would be like saying I went to the U.S. and was in like Charleston, South Carolina. Wow, this place is phenomenal. It's just a little bit different.
No, I get it completely. We had also went over to Lake Atitlan and spent some time in some of the villages around Lake Atitlan, which granted have a lot of tourists as well, but it was, my point in mentioning that is it was quite a bit different, than Antigua. It's a totally different feel. And then obviously as you move up into the eastern parts of the country, it's a totally different feel. We spent some time in a very, very small town. Can't even think of the name of it, but I think it's great when you can really see a place like Antigua, but then maybe go pick some random place and just stay for a couple nights where you're not likely to see a bunch of tourists. What about folks that don't speak Spanish and are worried about that? What kind of advice or suggestions would you have for somebody that wants to travel around but really doesn't have grasp of the Spanish language at all?
I mean, it's probably no different than people who want to go to Southeast Asia. I think you just got to go for it. I mean, I don't think you could let not having a grasp of the language be something that's going to hold you back. You find a way to communicate. When I first got here, I had very little Spanish. So when I came in the university days, I had zero Spanish, a lot of pointing and gesturing, and you learn a couple key words. And certainly in and around Antigua and anywhere you go, and there's a developed tourism industry, there's going to be a lot of English. So I feel really good about getting in and largely being here and communicating and being able to, set up shuttles and get yourself to hotels and move yourself around. But even beyond that, venturing further afield, I mean, I feel like we wouldn't go anywhere. We were always worried of, not being able to speak the language. I mean, how could you ever aspire to go to the Middle East or go to Europe or go elsewhere if you're always worried about not being able to communicate? I mean, that's part of the beauty of it. You got to dig deep and kind of figure out ways to make it work. I think I wouldn't let it hold you back. So you get down here. There's enough guys like me who live here who are facilitating tourism, and the locals themselves also, speak a lot of English and could certainly help you out. So, I'd say get it going, buy your ticket, and come on.
And we've got Google Translate, all those things we didn't have. When you first went to Guatemala, when I first started traveling, it's I almost forget sometimes. It's like, oh, I do have my phone in my pocket, but I'm still struggling, like because I'm trying to work on my Spanish.
Yeah.
Or if
I
I'm in
mean,
Asia, I really want to be able to communicate without the phone. But it's pretty cool that you've always got that backup in your pocket as well. So,
sure. I mean, long are the days of carrying around that little dictionary. Remember that?
oh, oh my gosh, yeah, I was in a relationship with somebody that did not speak English as a primary language when I was younger, and yeah, every conversation had the little dictionary, and for every two or three sentences, there was 4 or 5 minutes of page flipping, and now you can do it on the phone. So that's pretty cool. And I think people that are adventurous by nature can get past that language part. But I
Sure.
also know I've spoken with an awful lot of people that like only want to go to Ireland or Scotland or the UK, or places where they just feel like they're going to be able to communicate. For and
Sure.
and that's not always a guarantee either, because I've been to those
No.
places.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily that much easier. But
Yeah. And I get
anyway,
it. You're able to kind of deep dive a little more when you speak the language, and I certainly understand that. That's where maybe hiring a guide, if you're really worried about going into some of the areas, you really want to get in, break in with the locals, and it's like being able to communicate and really extract, kind of an experience, is certainly very important and rewarding. And guides can help a lot of times, and not just hiring one person to facilitate.
well, and yeah, because the guide himself, they have a story, right? So if you go visit Guatemala and your guide is Guatemalan, you can learn a lot about the culture and all that stuff from having that conversation. Where if you're just relying on trying to get along with your phone, might not necessarily be the best route. Maybe a mix. That's kind of what I've done. I I came directly to Latin America a couple of years ago when I started my journey and knew no Spanish at all. And it was great for me because I quickly realized that if I want to have those, connections and those deeper conversations, it's up to me to learn. I've spent a lot of time in Colombia where most people don't speak English here. And that's actually, I love it. And the more I can have a conversation with somebody, I'm like, oh wow, we actually communicated. They understood me, I understood them. It's very rewarding, and I feel like a lot closer to the community. So anyway,
Absolutely.
so there's a couple things specifically that you guys do a lot of there in Antigua. And when I was there, see, everybody was talking about Acatenango. Did I say it right? Yeah, okay. Maybe not quite right. But that was super, super exciting. I was there with my teenage son. And I know him too well to, I think last time you and I spoke, you said you kind of got to want it. And he usually wants things for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then he's like, okay, I don't want it anymore. So tell us about this really special trip that you guys offer.
Yeah, it's just, it's a really beautiful, big. So Antigua sits in a valley ringed by three big volcanoes: Agua, Acatenango, and Fuego. Acatenango and Fuego kind of share a saddle between the two, and Fuego is active and spectacularly active. You can see lava from the streets of Antigua, from your patio, from your backyard, from the neighboring volcano that's right beside. So it's a really cool experience. The big, Acatenango is Guatemala's third largest volcano, right at about 13,000 feet. Um, and you get up on top, and it's a big slog to get there, but it's a beautiful forest, and you go through very different climatic areas, agriculture, cloud forest, and pine forest, and grass, and grassland, and then you're up kind of in the alpine, and it's super pretty. And then you get up and you're at this campsite, and you're looking right at Fuego Volcano, and it's as you're sitting there, a hot chocolate at sundown, and you get a beautiful sunset. Fuego's blowing up, and it's crazy, and there's lava. It's a pretty magical place, and it's just a really beautiful. The views are phenomenal. You can look well into Salvador, and you look all the way out across the western chain of the Ring of Fire, which is kind of looking towards the Mexican border. You can look out across another 15 or so volcanoes kind of dotting the hillsides. It's just a really magical place.
We Jackson and I, when we got into around Flores, we ran into some people at a guest house, and they were showing me some pictures of Fuego. And honestly, I was like, nah, what kind of camera did you have? They're like, no, I took it with my phone. I'm like, no, I just did not believe them. I thought these people are selling, I don't know what this is all about. Or you must have been like so incredibly lucky to be up there when it was happening. And then as we continued our journey, I ran into more and more people. And then we ended up in Antigua. And people, would say, oh, yeah, we just got back. And they'd show me the pictures. And it's really, really, really cool. And I've traveled a lot and I didn't know anything about it. Maybe that's because I don't plan ahead very well. But it's super cool. So that's definitely when I return, that's something I'm definitely going to do. I'll be with somebody or I'll do it myself, but I'll be with somebody that maybe enjoys it a little bit more than my son would have. That would have been a frustrating day on the mountain 10 minutes in when he's like, okay, I'm going back down. Yeah. So anyway, and obviously you do a lot of bicycle stuff as well. That's not a bicycle trip, but what are the, a couple other things that you're really excited about that people might not be aware of that they can do there in Antigua that you can help them with?
Yeah, mountain biking is what ultimately or originally brought us to my brother and I to Guatemala. I've always been a cyclist. I've always enjoyed riding bikes. It's always been something we've always done. And that was, it's where our passion, well, it's where we kind of started, it's where we cut our teeth in Guatemala. So we do a lot of tours. I've hiked my bike out of every ravine in this country, it seems. We've, networked a series of trails. And, back in the late 90s, it was just me out there by myself. Maybe I had a couple tourists in tow. And now, I was on a ride this morning before, just out for fun. And I bumped into two locals. And so, like, the mountain scene has grown. It's phenomenal. There's a multi-day stage race now. There's a huge, just kind of mountain bike racing scene and culture here. There's bike parks. And it's really, I would have never expected that, back in the late 90s to now. And, largely a lot of that came on us bringing tourists here. We were working with European wholesalers in 2000, bringing groups of riders here, which was unheard of, and going all the way around the country. So we do anything from half-day rides in Antigua to multi-day rides around the country, vehicle supported, where we're either hotel to hotel, point A to point B, or we're camping, kind of depending on how far afield you want to go. We've also started running some backpacking trips, which, if you're not familiar with that, is kind of where think of backpacking, but you're doing it on bikes, and bikes that have bags and everything on it. It's kind of, away from the days of just like on pavement. These bikes are, and the bags are able to carry loads, through the trails and so really able to access really far away places where, great riding, but you can never stay. You can't get a vehicle or two. Just carry it with you. So we've been doing a lot of that in some routes here, which is fun.
That is very cool. And what else should we know? Because I don't know a whole lot about mountain biking. Know a bit about Guatemala. What else should we know? What else needs to be touched on while we're having this conversation?
I think that if folks are talking, Guatemala is kind of the total package. It's got a little bit of everything. We've got a pretty cool surf beach not too far away. That's kind of a newer on the scene kind of destination, and the riding here is great. And the volcanoes, and there's multi-day trekking. We do some 3 and 5 day treks across the Guatemalan Islands, where we're taking glamping setups with us along the way. The culture, we hadn't even really talked about the culture, but we talked about what sets it apart. I think that's one of the things that makes adventuring here so unique, is that the Guatemalan culture, once you get into that, country, to see, the living, the Maya out there is super vibrant and very colorful and super cool. In some places, just such a throwback to times that seem so forgotten. And you go into some of these regions that are, still on the roads. So it's just phenomenal. And you put all that together, and all of a sudden you walk away with this experience. It's like, I had no idea that was in my backyard. Guatemala's really so close to the U.S. We're just largely one country removed from the southern, southwestern U.S. It's so close, but yeah, literally feels like it can't be on the other side of the world.
No, yeah, I get it, and it's so close. I was in Arizona just a few weeks ago. I'm back in Colombia now, but I was in Arizona a few weeks ago looking at flights from Phoenix to Guatemala City for like, I mean, it was like $70,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and people are like, oh, it seems so far away, whatever. No, you just get to go there.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool whether you stay in Guatemala or you continue your travels or whatever. It's one of my favorite places on earth. So I appreciate the opportunity we've had to discuss. And like you said, the cultural part. I mean, it's like every town has its own like feel, its own mind, um, elements, languages, dialects, all this stuff. The food, I really enjoy the food. And well, it's a pretty cool place. I know that you mentioned you've got North Face in Antigua. I recall you also have Taco Bell, which seemed really weird to me when
Yeah,
we got there.
that's been in the past 4 or 5 years. Now there's a Starbucks. We just got that.
Uh-huh.
It's like, I loved it back in the days, and there was nothing. There was no McDonald's. There was none of that stuff, and they've all slowly fought their way
Yeah,
in. And it's like the way the world, just the globalization of things. It's
it
changing.
was interesting. I did notice that when we walked by there one evening after it was fairly late, and so maybe some people had been out partying or drinking or whatever, and a lot of places in the States, Taco Bell is where you go after you've been doing that type of thing. And there were a lot of people in there, but they were all locals, which I thought was interesting. And I didn't see any tourists in there. And that kind of made me feel good because I'm like, I don't want to go to Antigua and eat at Taco Bell. There's so many other good options. So anyway,
Yeah.
so Matt, I'm going to have your website link here in the show notes. So anybody that's listening to this that wants to learn more about Guatemala, Antigua, your program, those, the bike camping sounds actually really cool. I think that's pretty cool. And just anything. So they'll reach out to you. Is there anything else I should add to the show notes? Is that the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I think that just through our website, adventureguatemala.com is the website. There's you can book stuff now, or you can reach out via email. There's contact forums. My email is matt@adventureguatemala.com. That's another easy way to do it. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to get in touch.
All right, very cool. Well, I appreciate you joining us here on the Big World Made Small podcast and helping us make this big world feel just a bit smaller. And great chatting with you, great connecting with you. Look forward to meeting you in person next time we have a conversation. So thanks, Matt. Appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.